So, folks, I've talked a lot about Miles Guo. He is the Chinese billionaire who escaped China from the CCP. He was very connected with the Chinese Communist Party, gets out of there, comes to the United States, and has a tremendous amount of business dealings here. Well, he was just arrested last week for a $1 billion fraud case. The indictment's about 38 pages long. If convicted, he would face 215 years in prison. Now, what's so odd about this is Miles Guo is a guy that when he got here, he went to the FBI. I've played sound bites of him warning America about a potential pandemic launched by the CCP and their plans to do it. I am told by sources close to Miles that he went to the FBI years ago to expose that plan. And the FBI did nothing about it. And that plan apparently goes straight to Xi Jinping, which is why Miles Guo is enemy number one for the Chinese Communist Party. Now he faces this 38-page indictment. I've read through all of it. They say he bilked investors. But of the thousands of, that's a quote, thousands of victims, guess what the Department of Justice doesn't do? It doesn't name one victim. In the indictment, it doesn't even label one complaint from an unnamed victim. It's just 38 pages of what the Department of Justice says Miles Guo did. The investors, which you saw earlier, they came out, many of them, and held a protest against the Department of Justice. I've never seen this. I've never seen a guy arrested for fraud and the investors come out wanting him freed, okay? Something doesn't smell right. Here's one of the investors.
We are not victims of Miles Guo or GTV. We are the victims of the SEC, of the DOJ, of the federal government agency of United States who are infiltrated by the CCP. You think you have a bloom over you? Think again. If the CCP spy are working in your department of DOJ and SEC and IRS, no American, no single one of you are safe.
Now, listen. I'm not an investigator. I don't know the details behind this, but I know there are some strange things when you don't have victims. I've never seen that before. You put a guy who now faces 215 years, you now hold him, you seize all his cash, but here's what's really funny. The judge in this case, when Miles Guo went before him to plead not guilty, the government issued a ruling. This judge issued a ruling, and it reads that the government must disclose all evidence favorable to the defendant. Now, why would the judge have to issue the prosecution and the FBI in order to make sure they disclose every ounce of evidence? I believe it's because the FBI now has a history of not supplying those accused of crimes any evidence. We see it in the J6 case. We see it all over the place. We see it with President Trump. We see it all, every step of the way with the FBI. They don't disclose to people the evidence they have against them. So the judge offers up this ruling to say, hey, make sure you disclose this. Now, here's the problem with the American justice system. It's based off of trust. In fact, our entire system as America, democracy, capitalism, is based off of trust. Even our currency, the full faith in the United States government, the full faith and trust. I don't have trust in this government. I certainly don't have trust in the prosecution or the FBI anymore. And adding to all of this, just bizarreness, is hours after Miles Guo was taken downtown to be questioned by the FBI, a fire breaks out in his apartment, like 6 hours after he's gone. Guess who's in the apartment? FBI agents. FBI agents in his apartment. They call it in. It's a 2-alarm fire. And then it gets even worse. In court, the prosecution is asked, what role did China play in this prosecution? And the prosecutors, the Justice Department, the federal government says, quote, we worked a lot with China. Now, this is the CCP's enemy number one. What do you mean you're working with China? China's our enemy. How do you work with China on a case where you're going after their number one enemy who's literally trying to tell Americans about China's plan to unleash a pandemic on us, and they're working with China? This is crazy. So with me now to talk about all of this is the former assistant U.S. attorney in Northern California, legal analyst and author of the book, The Mysteries of Watergate. John O'Connor is with us. John, it's great to have you back on the program.
Good to be with you, Grant.
All right, John, let's take from the end here. Prosecution admits, yes, we were working with China on this case. That can't be good for the prosecution.
Well, no, it can't, especially if you're working with China. For a prosecutor, that means one thing. China has evidence that you need. And if you are looking to China for witnesses, even if it's documents, documents must be supported by a witness. So you're looking for witnesses. And if your witnesses are from communist China, getting a guy that's an enemy of the state, how reliable are those witnesses? How reliable is the evidence? Is there a natural tendency to feel that the Chinese are framing this guy, especially when the investors don't seem to be too upset? Now, I suppose there are a lot of very successful companies in the United States where the investors are very happy, and maybe the company was aggressive and, did something that was too aggressive in the way they stated something. But it's odd that those companies get prosecuted. How many times has Facebook been too aggressive in its filings? I don't know. Or didn't disclose everything perfectly in its SEC disclosures with no complaints. And the only complaint apparently comes from our mortal enemy in China. The whole thing really does stink. And you noted, Grant, the judge granted an order. I find it incredible that she felt Catherine Parker, who, by the way, is a straight arrow. She's as straight down the middle as they come. She felt right away that something obviously smelled. You don't need to tell a prosecutor that they should be giving over a so-called Brady versus Maryland material. Every prosecutor knows that, except I think the January 6th prosecutors may not have gotten the memo yet. But most prosecutors know that, and they're very honorable about it. And no one has to ask you. You have to tell the other side. Now, here is a judge right off the bat smelling something and putting in writing, warning the government, you better give out all the exculpatory information. It's a stunning order because that need not be said. It's like telling a bank teller, by the way, we don't want you to take from the till. There's a reason you're telling the bank teller that,
So, it's amazing to me because I've covered court cases for many years. I've been in media for probably 30 years of my adult life. I've never seen an order from a judge that says, hey, make sure you turn over all the discovery and evidence you have against the defendant. I mean, that's like right out of law school. Of course you have to do it. But I said this system is based off of trust. I'm at a point I'm not sure we can trust the FBI and the DOJ anymore when it comes to prosecuting people that are going after conservatives or, of course, liberal ways of thinking.
Well, also, Grant, they have the defense has the right to call as witnesses anybody who has exculpatory information or who is supplying information to the government. So now tell me, is Guao going to have due process rights to confront his accusers? No, it's people hiding behind the curtain in China, in communist China. And of course, what this raises an ugly specter. What kind of influence does China have that they can get our DOJ to file this case? And it then raises the whole idea of the Bidens getting paid for quite a while now. And it's now being exposed in D.C. in these committee hearings. Thank God there's a slight Republican majority in the House.
So that is my biggest concern. Who's running this investigation? Is it the Chinese Communist Party or is it the FBI? And if they're partnering up in it, that's wrong. I don't care what the evidence is in the case and who's guilty and not guilty. You can't be operating like this in a case where in a court system you're presumed innocent until proven guilty. Operating like this is really, really bad. And just to add to everybody at home, this arrest came just about a week or two after the new federal state of China that Miles Guo helped find, along with Stephen Bannon, they were going and then walking the halls of Congress, trying to drum up an investigation into the CCP's myths and inroads into the United States government, and then lo and behold, Miles Guo's arrested. That gives me chills. John O'Connor, it's great having you on because from your perspective, this is really an important interview. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks, Grant. We've got to watch this one.
Absolutely, and I'll have you back to help me do it. You're a good man, John O'Connor. Thank you.